Last year, Oxford University, a team coached by Alan Jones, who of course is coaching Australia today.
Well, this is the Irish side today, fielding 14 of the 15 players they used in their opening World Cup match against Wales a fortnight ago. The only change is at number 8, where 23-year-old rookie Neil Francis, who's never played in this position before prior to the World Cup, comes in after a very impressive debut for Ireland against Tonga 4 days ago. Selected as a lock for this tour, but at 6 feet 6 inches has been chosen as the number 8 in the hope that he can nullify the line-out advantage that the Australians should command in this phase of play. Ireland will be captained again today by Donald Lenihan. Alan Jones has sprung a couple of surprises in naming his side for this match. Firstly, he has shunted David Campese from wing to fullback in place of the injured Roger Gould, which has the added effect of giving the Australian backline a little more pace and zip. Neither Burke nor Grigg, the two wingers named for this match, are renowned for their speed. But the big surprise was in the front row, the naming of Cameron Lillicrap, the 24-year-old Brisbane University student who was replaced at Topol Rodriguez, the Argentinian Wallaby. And this has come as a major surprise here in Australian rugby. And, of course, Rodriguez has been the cornerstone of the Australian scrum for the last 3 or 4 years, but he has slowed down a little in his World Cup matches, and Lillicrap gets his big moment today. Well, unfortunately, the day here in Sydney is very overcast. We've had a lot of rain over the last 36 hours, and the field here at the Concord Oval, although from the high position up here in the camera it may look perfect, I can tell you that it's a very heavy ground out there this afternoon. The ground staff, when they arrived here at 7 o'clock this morning, were amazed at the amount of water that was lying on the ground. Their intention was to cut the grass today in the hope that it would improve the performance of the ground, but there was so much water around that they could not do that. They've been drilling holes all day, trying and mopping the water up, but I'm afraid between the 222s on this side of the ground, the field is expected to cut up very, very quickly. And as a result of the indifferent weather we've had here in Sydney, the crowd here at the Concord Oval today is not as large as had been anticipated. It has a ground capacity of about 20,000 people, but with this stormy weather that's around Sydney, and there's a lot of black cloud above us at the moment, the crowd is probably no more than about 10 or 15,000 people. A lot of interest in this match here in Australia, and particularly the performance of the Australian team. And with me this afternoon I have Trevor Allen, the former Wallaby captain. And as we mentioned before, the opinion appears to be largely divided here in Australia about this Wallaby team. But the feeling I get is that it just doesn't seem to have the support that the team had in New Zealand last year or had when it won the Grand Slam.
Well, I think basically, Brendan, of course, when they won the Grand Slam and the performance they put on in New Zealand last year was great. And at the moment, they're not firing very well. And I think the Australian public have been a little bit disappointed with them.
It's quite a contrast to the overwhelming support the All Blacks are getting in New Zealand, but here in Australia, opinion is divided. In fact, at this Oval here 3 days ago against Japan, the Australian team was booed and jeered for their indifferent performance. Well, they're getting a better reception today as they come out onto the field. There's Cameron Lillicrap, the new man on the field, Tom Lawton, Nick Barr-Jones, Steve Cutler, Brett Papworth, Peter Grigg, and the sombre face of David Campese. It's a big day for the Australian fullback, who returns to the place where he played against the All Blacks in the second test last year. He had a nightmare of a game down there, and he will be a key player in this Australian side today. But he will be under a lot of pressure, and I'm sure the Irish inside half, Paul Dean, will be putting the ball high very quickly to test Campese, a facet of his play that has never been renowned for its strength. No Irish national anthem here today, so there will just be the Australian anthem before the match gets underway. And this really is a big test, not only of the character of the Australian team today, but also their confidence, which I imagine has been rocked a little by the stinging criticism that they've taken in the news media. Even this morning, in the Sunday Telegraph here, Mark Eller, who writes a rugby column, was very, very strong and caustic in his words about the Wallaby performances in the World Cup. In fact, he's made the comparison, which is interesting, and I'm sure Graham Thorne, if he's listening, will be most intrigued to hear this, that he likens Australian rugby at the moment to the stereotype rugby that British teams played 5 years ago.
Yes, well, look, can I just say one thing, Brendan? This is rather interesting. I think will interest the people in New Zealand. The Australian side will not come over to the area where they're supposed to have line up for the national anthem, and I think this is indicative of this side are really wanting to get together. The officials, I can tell you now, are quite upset about it, because it has been all through the week that the two sides line up, face the stand and the national anthems, or in this case, only the one. And the Australian side basically has refused to come over. So the Island side has gone down the other end, as you can see there now, and so they're forming up and getting together again. Personally, as an Australian, I think it's a bit of bad form. They know what was outlaid for them all through this tournament, but that's how I feel that they are going to play this very hard. And as I said in my earlier comments, Australia will have to.
And a crowd of about 15,000 people here at the Concord Oval in good voice this afternoon, supporting the Australian team with the national anthem, and they gave them a rousing reception. The Irish team, it's a big day for them, particularly for this man here, 23-year-old Neil Francis, thrust into the white-hot heat of international competition, playing today in only his second international. Paul Dean, something of a surprise, and is naming it first 5'8". The feeling was that Tony Ward, because he'd played in the last two matches, and especially now that Campisi was at fullback, that the tactical boot of Tony Ward would in fact wear the number 10 jersey. And the big surprise in the Australian team, 24-year-old Cameron Lillicrap, who has replaced Enrique Rodriguez in the Australian front row. And it's Michael Liner, with the Australians playing from right to left on this very soggy ground here at the Concord Oval, as Hugh McNeil brings play back towards the halfway. And it's on this side of the field where the ground is at its soggiest and that's is at its softest. And there you can see that area between the 5-metre and the 15-metre mark in from touch, which is looking rather barren and rather soft. Far Jones, and a very late charge on the Australian halfback. That'll be a penalty.
Yes, Cutler took that ball very well, or punched that ball well from the line out. When we watch the replay, watch it closely. Far Jones. Ooh, two. Yes, the second one really was the late one.
It was Philip Matthews, the Irish loose forward, that just charged straight into Nick Farr-Jones. And the big, solid Australian halfback, he's probably the biggest halfback here at the World Cup at 6 feet and nearly 13.5 stone. But even for this solid fellow, that was a very, very telling blow.
Yes, well, here it comes again, and of course you can see there's the kick away, and it's really the man up that high that really did the damage to Farr-Jones. But unfortunately for Farr-Jones, it looked as though he might have a severe shoulder injury. Unfortunately, I'd say it's a bit he's a bit unlucky because it's so early in the game, probably not warmed up, and probably that's one reason why he has really felt it.
Well, the day here in Sydney is rather chilly with all this wet weather that's around. It hasn't been as warm as it has been for the last couple of days. And look, Nick Farr-Jones does not look good at all.
Yes, and again, when we were speaking in our preview, I suggested that this man could be the big difference to the way the Australian side goes.
Well, this is the man that I guess you could say is the villain of the piece, Philip Matthews, the Irish loose forward that was completely uncalled for, that charge on Nick Farr-Jones. Perhaps Matthews might claim in his defence that he was trying to charge the kick down, but he's cut his face as well, and he looks very groggy, and I don't think he'll be taking much further part in the match. And Brian Smith, the Australian substitute halfback, quickly looks as if he's going to make an appearance in this match, which is only a minute old. So this is a big blow because Farr-Jones is really the architect behind this Australian team.
He certainly is. He's the player that they've depended on so much because he has become a very, very competent halfback. In many ways, he reminds me of some of the real top New Zealand halfbacks. He's solid. He's always there, and he's tackling. Unfortunately, I think he does too much tackling, but he's a tough character, and he looks as though he's going on with it.
Well, he's going to stay on, but he looks very groggy. And Smith, who looked to be warming up to take his place, has been shunted back to his position on the reserves bench. And so Farr-Jones will continue. But whether he will see out the match must be another question. And he's still not right. He's still indicating to the Australian camp that he...
Yes, I think he's looking for a bit of strapping. He doesn't want to leave the field at this stage.
And for those of you who may just have joined our telecast, I'm very pleased to have with me this afternoon Trevor Allen, the former Wallaby captain, a man who we know well in New Zealand with his work for ABC Rugby, but today on loan to us at Television New Zealand. Meanwhile, the attention focuses back to Michael Lynagh. Simple kick for the Queenslander, and the Australians, although they've paid a fairly heavy price for that penalty, with the injury to Nick Farr-Jones, are on the board and leading by 3-0 after just 1 minute of play. Michael Lynagh, who had kicked 36 points in the World Cup prior to this match, and that will do his confidence the world of good. It's always good to get the first one over. So the Irish, who have been one of the major disappointments here at the World Cup, their form has been rather indifferent throughout the first 3 matches of this particular tournament. And David Campisi, with his first touch of the ball, makes a mistake. Well, that was good thinking on the part of Michael Kiernan. He's tested Campisi right from the kickoff, and the Australian fullback has been found wanting.
Yes, he seemed to have the ball covered, but it was only a small knock-on, but knock-on quite enough of it.
Bradley to Dean. Back comes Kiernan on the switchback, but he's taken 15 metres out from the Australian line, and the Irish forwards have been penalised, a hand I think in that ruck, and already tempers are starting to fray there. It's Bill Campbell and Terry Kingston that started it, and Campbell is still having his say. He has a few words also to his opposite number, Willie Anderson, and it's going to be, I imagine, a fairly willing encounter. So Lynagh 15 metres from his own goal line.
Well, that was a confident kick by Lynagh. Lynagh, they certainly... Oh, here's the fracas that took place. Now, you might see, I think Campbell came over eventually to try and help out. He's not in the picture yet. And then got involved.
The Irish captain, Donald Lenihan, at number 2 in the line-out. It's the big man in the Australian side, Steve Cutler, who manages to pull down that untidy ball 15 metres inside the Irish half as the Australians start to roll them more. There's little Simon Poitevin, number 6, probably the smallest fellow on the field, or certainly the smallest forward. He's absolutely dwarfed amongst some of these towering big men in the Australian pack. And Farr-Jones on the Irish 10-metre line. And the referee playing advantage to the Australians. And again, it's Farr-Jones who's in trouble. I don't really think this man can continue for much longer. He's in pain again. And he must come off, surely.
Yes, I think, Brendan, he's a pretty sick boy, and obviously he's going to be quite sensible about this. I think, you know, he has a very bad injury there, one that obviously is not going to allow him to go through this match. And, of course, here's the youngster Smith, who played against Japan the other day and was not, I must say, terribly impressive. But then again, it wasn't an impressive side against Japan. But that's a blow to Australia.
This is the worst possible start that Australia could have wished for. Nick Farr-Jones, who had only played in the match against England, and this man, Brian Smith, has worn the number 9 jersey for Australia in their last 2 matches, but it was thought with the return of Jones today that it would make all the difference to this Australian team. But he's only been on the field for 5 minutes. Bradley testing Campisi again, and once again his hands let him down. The Irish with the quick throw-in, 15 metres inside the Australian half. And the Irish look as if they're willing to play this game at pace. Dean, Brendan Mulling with the kick across the field. Mulling.
Sorry, Brendan, but I'd have to say this. He can expect a few more bombs coming his way. They'll test him out now that he appears to not have his confidence. Tom Lawton, the Australian hooker, with a throw-in.
And Mr. Anderson not happy with those Irish forwards in their line-out and has awarded a defensive penalty to the Australians just a few metres out from their 22. So I suppose if there's two key men in this Australian backline, it would be Nick Farr-Jones and David Campisi. One has left the field and the other has looked very tentative on the two times he's touched the ball. That's not the start that I'm sure Alan Jones would want.
Yes, and obviously Campisi was brought into the game to bring thrust into this backline. Plenty of time, of course, for him to settle down.
The Irish 22 to the right of the picture. And a beautiful take from the new man, Neil Francis, the Irish number 8. Just look how high he went.
And then we swap over.
Well, that would give heart to the Irish efforts this afternoon. That superb take by Neil Francis and the release from Derek McGrath, and the Irish drive the Australians back to within 5 metres of the halfway line. Tommy Lawton. There's Francis again with the tap this time. That's untidy ball for Bradley. And the Australians, who have called for the short line out, the scrum midway 22 and halfway. Dean from the safety of his 22.
Well, to our New Zealand viewers, I must point out there's practically no breeze here today. The ground appears to be more moist this side than the far side. The ground seems to be holding, so it's capable of producing good open football when they decide to do so.
Well, the Irish winning a bit of ball from the lineouts here in the first 10 minutes of this match was coming as something of a surprise. Bradley got lost in the feet of Michael Lynagh, 5 metres outside the 22. And I think it was knocked forward as well by Lynagh, and so we'll have the scrum. And if you're wondering what that black strip is that appears on your screen every now and again, it's a steel rope. There's a number of them here in the stand at the Concord Oval, which are necessary to keep the roof of the stand on when the wind blows, believe it or not. Paul Dean, I mentioned before, it was something of a surprise to see him in this Irish backline after the Irish had decided to play Tony Ward in the last two matches. Not renowned for the same degree of tactical sense with his boot as Tony Ward. But he is a very experienced first 5'8", as is this man Michael Lynagh, who will kick for goal again.
Yes, and interestingly enough, I've just mentioned the wind. The umbrellas are going up on the far side because the rain is starting to come in a fine drizzle, and with it the wind seems to have lifted a little and is supporting Australia. That's blowing right to left, and so Lynagh has just a slight assistance of breeze and a little bit of rain to go with it. Lynagh, of course, is the player that when he's in goal-kicking form keeps Australia in the picture in a great number of games. And a lot depends on him. He's landed one already, but that was from straight in front. This one a little more difficult.
So Michael Lynagh with a kick of approximately 40 metres. This to make it 6-0. Michael Lynagh lands his second goal from 2 attempts, and the Australians out to a 6-0 lead. Well, he didn't have a very good day with his boot in the first match against England, where he only landed 4 out of 10, but since then he's been right on target, and he looks as if he's got his kicking boots on today as well.
And the clock showing 10 minutes gone in this first half.
And Michael Kiernan, the Irish centre, gets the match going again. And the tap taken down by Tynan midway 22 and halfway. Smith calling for it. It's the Australian 22. and the line is in trouble. But the Irish backs offside. Mullen, the two centres, Mullen and Kiernan.
And I must say, the referee, Mr. Anderson, had the game the other day, Australia and Japan, and he was fairly strict on that decision of the backs being up too close to the opposition.
And so another very tidy kick from Michael Lynagh from deep inside his own half. Play to take place now on the Irish 10-metre line. Once again, it's Neil Francis who takes it for Ireland. He couldn't keep his fingers around the ball, and it's eventually the Australians that win it. Lynagh with those Irish backs up very quickly. That's a good kick from Lynagh. Hugh McNeil goes in on the 22. It's there again for the Australian backs. Campisi's up from fullback. Burke to Campisi. But Michael Kiernan has him 15 metres from the Irish 22, and Bradley scampers away with the ball. Good play from Steve Timon, who was back covering for Campisi. Matt Bradley, who's playing today in his 18th successive cap for Ireland. Mick Doyle, the Irish coach, and Sid Miller, the other senior member of the Irish Management Party, here for the World Cup. Some pushing in the line-up by the Australian forwards. Results a penalty, 15 metres in from touch, of course. The Irish to take it on their 10-metre line.
One of the problems that Australia have had in their earlier lead-up matches that their forwards have not been racing as a pack. They're looking a bit tighter, playing like an 8, than they have previously. And this is the area, of course, that we're moving into that Australia expect to get plenty of ball in the short line out the goal.
But it's in fact Anderson that gets the tap for Ireland. Matthews midway 22 and halfway. He's lost it forward. The referee playing advantage to the Australians. Burke comes in to tidy the ball up from the Australians. Trevor Ringland and Matt Burke, these two old adversaries from the 1984 match, and some fairly vigorous rucking on Ringland. And the referee has in fact penalised Ringland, who was upset at these Australian boots going over the top of him, and he's pointing that out to Mr. Anderson, but he had been penalised.
Yes, there's little doubt that Ringland was really walked on by Burke. Whether anything occurred before there that the referees saw, or whether it was because he didn't let the ball go.
Well, it was very interesting that Burke and Ringland should explode there, because back in that match in 1984 they marked each other at Lansdowne Road in Dublin, and there was a very fiery exchange between the two of them, and obviously the score hasn't been settled. Good kick from Lynagh. That's the Irish line, just 15 metres away. The first time the Australians have been inside the Irish 22, and Lynagh charged down by Mullen. And McNeil has gone in. Crossan is there as well, just a few metres out from the Irish line. And the Australian forwards a little ragged to get there. The ball has gone loose, and that's a try. Andy McIntyre. A bad defensive error by the Irish, a couple of metres from their own line, has given Australia the first try of the match after 15 minutes of play, and the Australians out to a 10-0 lead. It was O'Neill that went in first of all, McNeil that went in first of all to tidy up the kick from Lynagh, which was charged down, and the Australian forwards a little slow to get there, and the ball went loose from that ruck. The pass from Bradley, and McIntyre there to score the try. The kick, as we said, was charged down.
Yes, and it would appear when you look at it that Ireland should have wrapped this up, should have wrapped it up pretty well, because all of a sudden there was enough of them there, but somewhere along the ball was spilt out and came out wide. Now, to me, they looked as though there was enough, and it should have been an Ireland ball, but someone, there it goes, there's the bad pass, and of course McIntyre up with it. So Australia away to a good start.
So line-up with the conversion. So the Australians, they haven't looked too impressive, but the fact is on the scoreboard, they're looking most impressive, out by 12-0.
Yes, unfortunately for Ireland, they really haven't started to get together themselves, but Australia's starting to move into a better combination than we've seen. Their forwards were a bit slow, I thought, getting to that ruck, but showing that they're anxious to get there, which should prove a benefit to them as they go through, because it is a good Australian pack.
Michael Keenan with the restart. And the tap back to Tyneman again, midway 22 and halfway. And that will do the Australian team a world of good. Their confidence, I'm sure, to be out by 12 points so early in this match. Smith, the replacement halfback, but he's put it straight into the arms of Keith Crossan. Crossan, who was trying to run the ball into touch. And Liner from inside his own 22. That's a huge punt from Michael Liner. He hasn't found touch. McNeil outside his 22.
Well, that long kick by Liner would give you a fair idea. He is a great punter of the ball, but there is the wind assistance, the one that was returned. Obviously, you could see the wind pick it up and drive it out. And so here's Australia on the attack again. Papworth right up with the ball. Of course, Crossan just saved for Ireland.
Anxious look, understandably, on the face of Mick Doyle. And again, the ball is loose in that Irish in-goal area. So another opportunity for the Australian backs, just 5 metres from the Australian line. The control from Tyman at the back. This is a good scrummage from the Australians. Very good scrummaging from the Australians. Over the line it goes, or does it? No, Mr. Anderson, who was in very good position to look at that ball. The control just dissipated there right at the last from the Australians. But we'll have another scrum, the Australians going forward. Bradley, the Irish halfback, ready to pounce. And here we go again. They'll try and perfect it a little better this time, will they? Tyneman. He's picked it up to Brian Smith. That's another Australian try. Well, maybe Alan Jones is going to make his critics eat their words today, because look at that scoreline. This is almost a point a minute stuff from the Wallabies, out by 16 points to 0, and Brian Smith, the replacement halfback, gets the try. And it came very simply from the scrum, the control from Tyneman out to Smith, and he went over in the tackle 15 metres in from touch.
Yes, it was, and as you can see, it was really pretty simple. The defence close in was not there, and Smith did it easily.
An injury by the look of it to Bill Campbell, while Liner lines up this kick for goal. So plenty of problems for the Irish team, down by 16 points to 0, and they really have got their backs up against it now, with the match, the first half, little over halfway.
Yes, well, it's not really at halfway. Just looking at the clock there, Brendan, we're showing about 18 minutes, and Australia going very well, doing it easily, and I must admit I'm a bit disappointed in this Ireland side.
In fact, in some ways, Trevor, looking at this Irish team, their performance is something like that of the Scots yesterday against the All Blacks. They're just absolutely doing nothing, aren't they?
That's exactly right. I watched the game yesterday, and the All Blacks seem to be in control. And I must say this, and probably New Zealand will not like it, but I thought they did it with ease. And Australia at this stage are not doing anything great, but putting the points on the board and doing it with ease. Mainly because yesterday I didn't think Scotland gave the opposition that the All Blacks wanted, and obviously Ireland are not coming back. He's hoping they do for the sake of the crowd.
Michael Liner from 15 metres in from touch. through what must be the tallest uprights I've ever seen at a rugby ground, and I imagine it must be a psychological boost or advantage for a goal kicker to be kicking at these posts, because the crossbar must look so low when you compare where it sits in relation to the height of the uprights.
They are really extraordinary, and I don't know whether our ABC people will give us a good look at them later, but they certainly are very, very tall.
So 18 points to 0 in favour of Australia as Michael Kiernan restarts. 2 tries in the first 20 minutes of the match to the Australians, and it's this man Liner again. He's already kicked 10 points from the match. 46 points in the World Cup so far for Michael Liner. The Irish with the deep throw. Nicely picked up by Brett Papworth. And that's a very untidy maul, but it is ball. Precious ball for the Irish, and Deans kicking again, putting some pressure on Campese. This time he takes his time and does it right. Well, Trevor Allen, what are your feelings about this man? Should he be at fullback or should he be on the wing?
Well, quite frankly, I've always thought his position is fullback. He has failed a couple of times, but I'm a great believer. You're going to have a player and you want him as a fullback, for heaven's sake, play him there for the rest of his time. Just chopping between wing and fullback doesn't do him any good in either position.
Here he comes from the throw. Bradley in the tackiest part, the sloppiest part of the ground, and Kiernan got rid of that ball pretty quickly. Knocked forward by Neil Francis, and the Australian put into the scrum.
Well, Ireland not looking a confident side at the moment. Not putting it together at all.
They've had problems throughout this World Cup. They haven't been helped by a pretty difficult travelling schedule. And the ball rolling towards the corner flag. Ringland manages to keep it in, but Burke wasn't going to allow him to get away. And he's having a super game today, is the 24-year-old Queenslander Michael Liner. I'm sure from the Australians' point of view, nothing could be finer than the sight of Michael Liner in this sort of form. The Australians again on the Irish line. Liner, Papworth, beautiful support play.
Matthew Burke.
And Matthew Burke gets the try. Burke had come in from the right wing. Wonderful understanding with Papworth. And these Australian backs are starting to fire. It's 22-0. We've had 22 minutes of play. And again, it started just a few metres from the Irish line. This is where the Australian backs today seem at their most lethal. Papworth, the little slip pass through to Burke, and there wasn't a hand laid on him.
A very fine try, it really was. Papworth just jinked enough to steady the defence, and then with his hip took the close-in defence, made sure that people were propping for him, and of course Burke, who was a strong player, came on the burst. He didn't have to be strong because, as Brendan said, not a hand put on him.
Lineup with his easiest kick today. It's 24 points to 0. And you may have seen the bewildered look on the faces of those Irish players. They really have been stunned by this onslaught from the Australians, who looked so nervous and tentative in the first couple of minutes. They lost their halfback, but it hasn't done any harm to their confidence. And here's the try again.
Good pass from Smith, of course. There's just Papworth taking the defence, holding it up, and of course, no trouble to Burke.
Trevor Allen has been gainfully employed here as a tactician this afternoon, and he hasn't stopped writing since about the moment that Michael Liner kicked that first penalty.
Yes, well, I'd like to see what happens and how it progresses, but I think I'll give up in a moment because the way Australia's going, they're going to rattle up some high scoring.
And so Ringland, and nothing going right for the Irish. Lost forward by Trevor Ringland, midway 22 and halfway. And oddly enough, if you look at the historic pattern of matches between these two countries and the 40-year history of matches between Ireland and Australia, they've played 3 times on Australian soil, and the Irishmen have won all 3 previous matches, but they don't look like they're going to win today. Australia are ahead by 24 points to 0. As the ball rolls through the softest part of the ground, And look at the commitment of Matt Burke.
There's little doubt the Australian players are playing as though they've been stung by all the criticism that has been flying around this week.
And the referee had spotted an infringement there by the Irish forwards in that line-out. So a free kick to Australia. And the line-up will no doubt put this ball as high as he can. And he's bombed it well. Bradley, and all he can do is just step into touch. I wonder what's going through the mind of the Irish coach Mick Lloyd at the moment. I don't suppose there's much the Irish can do except just put their heads down and try a little harder, because they're just not in the match at the moment. They're getting very little ball. They won a few line-outs early in the first 10 minutes. Line-up. These Australian forwards on the rampage again. It's there for Liner. He's got a line-up here. Campisi to Burke. Stepped into touch. Well, they say one of the great attributes of Alan Jones, the Wallaby coach, is his ability to motivate players, and they probably did need plenty of motivation after all the stinging criticism they've taken here for the last week, and it seems to have worked, because these men are playing extremely well at the moment. I think that throw was straight, was it, or maybe some other one? It's Australian ball. 5 metres from the Irish line. The line-up, Papworth, Brigg cutting back, taken in the tackle, 10 metres short of the line. And there's plenty of whistle coming from Mr. Anderson this afternoon. Australian forwards penalised for going over the top of Peter Grigg once he was tackled. Bradley. That's about the best the Irish can do at the moment. They are under siege.
Yes, they're not showing us any form whatsoever, really, of being able to settle down. The forwards can't get any sort of platform whatsoever. And the backs have been very tentative.
Lifting in that line-out, or some
going up on the shoulder by the look of it. And again, this referee was harsh the other day on the infringements in the line-out. There was a fair bit of whistle, but the play did go reasonably well. And here you can see Liner is taking one, and there is the distance, as you can see, just outside the 10-metre line. Very slight breeze assistance now every time the rain comes up, but it's really only come up once or twice in this game. It seems to bring a little wind with it. But at this moment, I would say, unfortunately, at this ground, there's not a flag in sight. But up here, you feel as though that it is deathly still. And so the advantage Australia had is gone, particularly for this kick.
Liner, who's the most prolific point scorer in Australian Test match history. If he lands this kick, it'll send his tally of points over 250 in Test matches. But he didn't strike it well. The timing wasn't there. And Kiernan clears from underneath his own goalpost, but he hasn't found touch. A lot of unforced errors coming from the Irish side now. Their confidence is obviously gone by the look of it. McNeil, and he does find touch.
Yes, it's going to be very difficult for Ireland to get back into the game with the 24 points. I don't know what they're going to do, because Australia are covering too well when they have it.
Australian forward penalised for offside, and so Kiernan again will kick for touch, and the Irish hopefully will make one of their rare excursions into the Australian half. Peter Grigg decides to have a bit of a run, coming in from the right wing. Campisi driving the Irish back again.
Well, Campese, of course, is a very strong punter of the ball. There's no doubt that Alan Jones has put Campese in there hoping that he would be able to burst into the back line, because the back line hadn't looked good at all in the run-up to this game. But he hasn't needed to do it today.
Dean with the restart from the 22, and here's Neil Francis, who's been, again, probably the most impressive of the Irish forwards today. He's won a ball from the line out and a good charge up the middle of the paddock, and has given the Irish something to cheer about. Campese again with the rolling ball, but he's settled down and he's playing a lot better now than he did in the first 10 minutes. It's David Campese, who needs one more try to set a world record for the most number of tries in a test match. He equalled it against Japan the other day. The Irish revert again to the short man, three-man line-out. There must be a minimum of 2 players on each side in the short line-out. Midway 22 and halfway. And it's worked for the Irish this time. They're going to have a bit of a run. Phil Orr, who's wandering around there in the middle of the back line from the short line-out. And they've won it from secondary phase as well for probably the first time today, but a poorly directed kick from Bradley, giving Campese plenty of time. He hasn't found his touch. And McNeil putting his players onside. Papworth is underneath it. It's there for the Irish again, just outside the Australian 22, but their forwards are pretty slow to get there. Kiernan kicking for England. Good positional play by David Campese, and he claimed a fair mark.
And the referee has awarded a penalty further back, and I gather it was for interference on the Ireland players coming through. He indicated in running across, we were watching Campese, of course, but when glancing back, the referee was heading in this direction up to this position, and has penalised Australia for, I would think, some sort of obstruction. That was the indication he gave. It certainly wasn't a late tackle, but obviously there was some obstruction on a player coming through by one of the Australian players. So a chance for Ireland to post their first points. My memory serves me correct, this is their first shot.
It is indeed for Michael Kiernan. It's from a relatively handy angle. The Australians are hit by 24-0. We've had 31 minutes of play. And that sort of sums up the luck that the Irish have had today. Kiernan from a fairly handy angle hooks it out to the left, and the Irish remain scoreless. McNeil again with the Gary Owen. Just look how high that is. Campese, I've never seen him take the high ball like that before, but he did it well. Disproving the theory that the man was perhaps a little gun-shy under the high ball. He took that with courage and with conviction in the face of those Irish forwards. And I imagine that might silence a few critics of David Campese's, who claim that he is weak and suspect under that sort of kick.
Because I think Campese's major problem is that if he gets unsettled, he always seems to be unsettled very early. Once he settles down, he's okay.
And there's just a listlessness about that Irish effort at the moment. Bradley, Dean, but this time the Irish backs are going to have a run. They've got plenty of speed and talent, and this man Ringland is a very good winger. They just look to be going through the motions out there. Play now 8 minutes away from half-time. Really haven't recovered from that quick onslaught of points in the first 20 minutes by the Australians, which saw them out to a 16-0 lead inside the first 15 minutes. The Irish captain, Donald Lenihan. Taken by Derek McGrath at the back of the line out for Ireland. There's Bradley, but Campese, he looks calm and composed. But the Irish got there at the same time this time, but at least he went underneath it and made a fairly valiant attempt to take it. The ball, I think, had been knocked forward by Campese, and so the scrum to take place just outside the 22. Meanwhile, there's an Irish player lying prostrate on the ground back at halfway. Doesn't look very happy either. Let's have a look at David Campese. He did go underneath it. He didn't shy away from the kick from Bradley, but he knocked it forward. and that's where the scrum will take place.
Yes, and of course the ball bounced away to Burke very neatly, so it really saved the day, and Ireland had no way of pursuing the ball on because it didn't get to ground, mainly because of Burke being there. But on the subject of David Campese, and we must face it, that he is a player that I guess people all around the world are talking about, and with the Bledisloe Cup coming up, there's little doubt that you've got people in New Zealand will be watching the performance of Campese. Campese is, as I say, I believe is a very good fullback, should be left into position all the time if he's the man to take the job, but switching back and forth between wing and fullback doesn't do him any good whatsoever. So I think Jones has got to make up his mind. He either plays him as a fullback or a winger and go on with it.
And this is a sad sight. Neil Francis playing in only his second match for Ireland, as leaving the field with an injury. He doesn't look too well at all after 32 minutes of play. The man that was brought into this match today for his height, he's 6'6", and he's done a pretty good job too in the lineouts, winning most of the clean ball that the Irishman has won so far in the match, but he looks as if he may not take much further part in the match. Look, so the Irish with 14 players. McGrath hang on to the ball a little long. He lost it forward as well. And Tony Doyle is just waiting for the OK to take his place on the field, the back of the Irish scrum. Francis still being checked by the doctor. And meanwhile, there's been another stoppage for injury. This time to Paul Dean, the Irish fly half. So there's casualties all over the field at the moment for the Irish. As Dean looks at his OK.
So I think Dean's might have been a convenient one to just see what was going to happen out here on the sideline. And the referee wants the game to go on.
Well, this is interesting because he's looked at Francis and said, "You're okay, fella, you can continue for a bit longer." So Tony Doyle puts his tracksuit back on, and Francis, still favouring his leg a little, is going to take his place after all at the back of the Irish scrum.
Yes, he looked a mess when he was walking off the field. He looked as though there was no way he was going to carry on, but he's made a remarkable recovery.
The old magic sponge. It's amazing what a bit of cold water does to a rugby player when he's injured.
Yes, it's. I didn't have it in my day.
Here we go again.
Yes, it's on again. But Ireland really are struggling. The clock showing us about 6 minutes to go to half-time, and they're really batting, dragging, trailing by 24 points.
Campese from inside his 22, driving the Irish back. The Irish appear, for the moment anyway, to have stemmed the tide of points that was flowing from this Australian side. Still 24 points to 0 for the Wallabies. That's the halfway mark. Bradley swallowed up by those huge Australian forwards. They come away with it again, the Irish. Dean. It's not a bad kick either. Campese has to go in underneath it. But these Irish forwards up inside the 10-metre circle. And Campese took the ball. And so they have the option, and I think they may have elected to go for the scrum, have they?
Yes, Slack has... he ran very quickly to the referee to find out what the decision was, and he very promptly said, "I'll have the scrum." So Slack must be trying to see if he can get his backs to get some more points before half-time.
Well, it is a very good attacking position because it's in the middle of the field. And Campese is up from fullback. Here's his first run. The chase is on. Campese against 3 Irishmen. In comes Crossan. He's fast. He's too fast for Campese. And just as well it was Crossan that was chasing it, the fastest man in the Irish team. And that was an interesting sprinting duel between Campese and Crossan, probably the 2 quickest men on the field. And Crossan was giving Campese the best part of a metre, but he overtook him, and Mullen came in as well.
Well, that was a great burst. A very good burst by the 2 players. A very exciting race.
Line up. Campese, who's coming more and more into the game after that tentative start. And it's always an awkward one for a fullback to take when he's standing right alongside the upright, especially one here, which is the best part of about 70 or 80 feet high. But fortunately for McNeil, the bounce wasn't too awkward. So into the last couple of minutes of the first half here at the Concord Oval on a grey, overcast day on a soft ground, but it hasn't stopped the Australians putting together their best performance so far in the World Cup. They're ahead by 24-0, 3 tries, and the rest of the points coming from the boot of that man lineup. Papworth takes it up to midway 22 and halfway, and the Irish loose forwards just winning a bit more ball from the loose at the moment. Campese showing he's got quite an educated left boot as well, and McNeil trying to cook something up from the back. Smith going underneath it. He lost it forward. And certainly the Irish back row has been one of their weaknesses here in the World Cup, and they clearly have missed the services of Nigel Carr. And in a tournament which has been dominated by some quite magnificent back row performances, the Irish have been overshadowed here, and it's perhaps not surprising that they find themselves on the outer of this World Cup. Good play by Smith as he had that kick covered. Trevor Wingard still unhappy about something there. I think he felt that Smith should have released the ball a little quicker than he did. We have seen players penalised for that in this World Cup, for hanging onto the ball after it has gone into touch and depriving the opposition the chance of the quick throw-in. And again, those Irish forwards are pretty loose, but the ball is there for them. McGrath coming in at first 5'8" on full speed. And Dean with Ringland. Now, there's a little bit of room here for Ringland, but those orange jerseys swarm him towards the touchline. Ball is still in play. Tyneman a couple of metres from his own line. And the Irish forwards have been penalised, in particular Terry Kingston. Going in over the top there. And the Australians, to their relief, receive a penalty just a couple of metres from their corner flag.
Yes, on that last move, Ireland, I thought, took the wrong option. They came around the blind side, and the attacking players on the blind side suddenly found a wall of orange jerseys.
Bradley waiting underneath it with some timely support from Philip Matthews. 10 metres outside the Australian 22. And Bradley, and there was a lineup of green jerseys here. Dean, oh, but a poor pass from Dean. And through goes Campese. Now Campese, can he control it? Here goes Crossan giving him the chase again. And what does Mr. Anderson say? No try. And again, it was Keith Crossan that just nipped literally Campese in the bud there, right at the try line. And he can't believe it, the despair. Look at this. There was no one in front of him at this point. And again, Crossan just flew in from the wing. Flew in. The ball drifted away a little from Campese. He had to come in on the angle. And that just slowed him up enough to allow Crossan to get there and clear it away. And that is half-time here at the Concord Oval. So the Wallabies at last have shed the shackles of mediocrity which had marked their first-round performances. They've hit form here with a vengeance against the hapless Irish. 3 first-half tries. The first coming to Andy McIntyre, the second to the replacement halfback Smith, and then Burke scored the third try. And this man here, David Campese, who has looked very, very lethal in the last 10 minutes. He's enjoying himself out there now. And Trevor Allen, as a former Wallaby captain, you would be breathing a lot better now than you were before the match.
Certainly, there's no doubt about it. And full credit to the Australian side. They, as we've said earlier, without repeating, just to say that they came under a great deal of criticism. They jumped pretty well. They had a few hiccups in the early part of the game, overcame the problem, and have got right on top of Ireland. And they've got on top basically because the forwards have taken control. Their backs have not played the flippant football that I suggested they played against Japan. They're looking more like an Australian back line, and of course Campese is adding that little bit of zest to them.
So that's how we see it here at half-time at the Concord Oval. 3 first-half tries have been the principal reason why the Australians are leading the Irish by 24 points to 0 at the break.
And we'll return to Brendan Telfer and Trevor Allen at the Concord Oval when the second half begins. Well, Matty Blackburn, I was told by the Irish management before this World Cup started that this particular Irish backline was probably the best of all time in Irish history. I would hate to see their worst.
So would I. One can be quite scathing about the approach that Ireland are taking to this match. they've been completely negative in anything that they've been doing. The only one occasion that I thought that they could have done something about it was a poor pass to Michael Keenan, and as a result the move broke down, and they'll need a miracle to come out of this. I'm looking to chase 50-0.
Heavens above. Bernie Fraser is also with me. The Irish team, another bad factor of their players, their almost total lack of support play, isn't it?
Yes, their biggest problem is they haven't got a loose Lucy, and the time that the ball does come out and it goes, the Irish try to do something with it, and when it breaks down, there's just no Irish forward within Cooey, and from there the Australians just launch back onto attack, and the Irishmen, they get in the ball in very good positions at time, but they just don't know what they do with it, and I think the fullback in the Irish team is very similar to the Fijian fullback, and all they want to do is kick it, and I think that the Irishmen have really got to take the game to the Australians and the backs and just run hard and straight and see what comes about after that, but they're just not doing it.
Well, the Irish team, even at the half-time break, appear to have split into two camps. There's no sense of unity there. Donald Lenihan was trying to instill some cohesion into his backline, but really for these Irish supporters, it's all bad news. Australia 24, Ireland 0 at the break. What do you think of the Australian effort, Bernie? They've got 24 points on the board, and against an Irish team which isn't playing well. How well are Australia playing?
Well, if for a team to be playing badly and score that many points, you know, they can't really be too bad. They seem as if they're a wee bit disjointed at times, but I don't know whether it's that the fact that so much pressure's on them from outside of rugby, and they seem to be going all right. But you know, I still don't think we've seen the Australian side of, say, even 2 years ago. So if they hit their straps, you know, they can play a lot better than that.
Bernie Fraser and Matty Blackburn, thank you for those half-time comments. It's 24 points to 0 to Australia over Ireland in this Rugby World Cup quarter-final. Donald Lenihan with a lot of work in front of him in the second half if he's to get back into the match. We'll return to Brendan Telfer and Trevor Allen in just a moment.
Rugby World Cup action continues with live coverage presented in association with National Mutual.
I tell you what, that crosses fast.
Play about to resume here at the Concord Oval in the second half of this quarter-final match between Ireland, who will play from right to left in the second half, and Michael Keenan to restart play. So the Irish have 40 minutes left to arrest their dwindling hopes in this World Cup, down by 24 points to 0. They face a very difficult job to get back into this World Cup against an Australian side that at last is starting to fire in this World Cup, and maybe what Alan Jones said to me during the week is right, that he claims that one or two of the fancy teams in this World Cup have peaked too early. They haven't paced themselves right. And he feels the Australian team have got themselves into the right momentum, just shifting it up a gear with each match. And that essentially is what has happened with this Wallaby team. They have improved little by little in each match, and today they've taken a quantum leap in improvement, and they're well on their way to the semi-finals. Well, the old adage that the Irish play well and they are the underdogs, well, this is the time for them to prove the worth of that saying, because they're well and truly the underdogs at the moment, as Liner takes the tap kick, pushing it down the open side of the paddock. Trevor Ringland was there, but he left it for Hugo McNeil, and he's testing Campisi, but Campisi really hasn't put a foot wrong since he fumbled a couple of balls in the first couple of minutes. Crossan covering for McNeil on halfway, and the ball slipped into the arms of Steve Cutler. Midway 22 and halfway inside the Australian half. And Mr. Anderson wisely decides it's time to call for the scrum.
And what a difficult decision for the Irish captain, just how to play this second half. The only thing, of course, he can do is plan to perhaps get more possession and move his backs, who so far have proved to me to be a lot slower than the Australians.
The Irish backs were highly regarded when they came down this part of the world for the World Cup, but they've shown very little of their skills in this tournament, and especially today. Liner to Campisi, and the Interesting feature about this Ireland backline is that it's exactly the same backline they used in the match against Wales, which was exactly the same 7 backs they used for every one of their 4 or 5 Nations Championship matches this year. So they know their play well. They know each other's play well. This, in essence, is the 6th major championship match this year they've played together, all 7 of them. Bradley with the pass, which was designed, I think, to find Mullen and miss out Kiernan.
But one of their failings, of course, is their half position combination.
We just have a slight problem with our Australian commentary circuit for the moment. It appears as if we have another injury break, and the Irish halfback Michael Bradley being attended to by the referee Brian Anderson of Scotland. Friendly pat on the head for Michael Bradley. And the line out to form, that's the 10-metre mark in the Australian half. $24 points to 0 to Australia. Smith to Liner. Bradley waiting back for Ireland on the halfway line. And it appears we have our commentators back. Let's go back to Brendan Telfer and Trevor Allen.
Well, you've missed a very little while you've been away. There's been an injury break to Matt Bradley, and from the line-out, a high up and under from Michael Liner. The Australian loose forwards are caught offside, and Kiernan with a penalty. And I think he's going to kick for goal right on halfway. So this is a big kick for Michael Kiernan, all of 50 metres and more. He's only had 1 shot at goal, so that's another interesting indication to the Australian performance. A very disciplined performance in the first half. Kiernan only was able to kick for goal once from a penalty, and he missed with that.
And earlier we talked about the victories that Ireland have had against Australia, particularly in this country. And of course, one man that really destroyed us several years back was that goal kicker Ollie Campbell. He really was a thorn to the Australian side in those days.
Not a bad looking kick from Kiernan, just dropping a couple of metres under the crossbar from 50 odd metres out. So that's 2 misses nonetheless for Michael Kiernan today, the nephew of the great Tom Kiernan, of course. And Michael Liner to restart on the Australian 22. No change to the half-time score. The Australians are hit by 24 points to 0. They scored that 24th point in the 25th minute of the first half. So it was a point a minute stuff for the first 25 minutes, but nothing since then. And Liner testing Ringland again, and he's not getting away from Matthew Burke this afternoon.
Australian player injured. Back towards their quarter.
Looks like one of their big forwards who's taken a blow, and so we have another stoppage for injury. And I think it's Steve Cutler who's taken a cut to his nose, and it doesn't look too good either, but he's going to resume his place in the line-out.
I don't know, that might have been the incident there. One of the Irishmen kicked at the ball, and I would say he definitely kicked at the ball, and he just clipped Cutler. Bit of a mess, but I would say quite accidental.
Australia again with a short line out, 6-man line out this time. The Irish loose forwards in very quickly on Smith, and they've won it this time. And Dean testing Campisi, but it's far too deep. He's got all afternoon to line that one up. Maybe the Irish might have been better to have played Tony Ward this afternoon, because really Dean has not tested Campisi at all.
And I must admit, I don't think Dean has been very smooth in his movements from the 5'8" position. He has slowed up the midfield attack.
Alan Jones, who looks a little agitated by something, up out of his seat, having a word to one of the reserves while play continues. As Burt takes the ball into touch. Midway 22 and halfway. He's having a word there to Roger Gould, who was not available for this match because of injury, and it's in fact Campisi who's replacing him, of course, at fullback. And Gould and Jones have left the grandstand. Or they've gone for a little chat on the landing just down in front of us, away from the rest of the Australian team. Well, the Irish backs decide to have a run. Kiernan, Crossan, left behind by Hugo McNeill. And he knocked it forward as well.
It's very difficult to assess what the conference was about, but I would not be surprised if he thinks that maybe Cutler shouldn't be out there with this bad gash that he's got.
Campisi, but again this time McNeill with plenty of time. We've seen that kick a few times today from Hugo McNeill, but that was a little astray. He wasn't meaning to find touch, of course, because he took it from outside his 22 and it skewed off the side of his boot and into touch on the full. So a rare mistake from the reliable Irish fullback, steady as a rock usually, Hugo McNeill. Difficult one again for Smith as the tap back.
Yes, Cutler got a hand to that one, not neatly enough, and of course it made it very difficult for this little halfback.
Now, what can the Australian backs cook up here? Campisi is moving wide outside of Grigg, but they're going the short side, and Grigg trying to get inside his opposite number, Crossan, Peter Grigg, who's not as fast as he was a few years ago, but he's been one of the informed backs in the Australian team this World Cup so far. It was a bit of a dilemma for Alan Jones with Burke, Campisi and Grigg all in pretty good form, and the injury to Roger Gould in some ways relieved him of what might have been a difficult choice for the two wing berths this afternoon. And it's there again for the Australian backs. Slack, Grigg coming in from the right wing. The referee playing advantage for the knock-on from Grigg, but there was none to the Irish. The Australian backs just looked a little casual on that occasion as they moved the ball. There was a big line-up effort. They got very bunched, very close together when there was a lot of room free further out.
Yes, they were standing a bit too flat for what they were attempting to do. All this straight across the field. Grigg limping back.
Well, I suppose you couldn't blame the Australians if they are suffering a little from overconfidence at the moment. They're so far ahead on the scoreboard that they shouldn't lose this match, and they're playing well. Bradley and Campisi. He's about 30 metres from the Irish line. He's put it very high. Good kick from Campisi. Good kick. Well taken by Matthews, a few metres out from his own line.
It's a strange thing about Australian sides when they get a heavy lead like this, 24-0. They're inclined, and always have, inclined to let the pressure come off, and it is a bad failing. Here's the kick, and here is Campisi going up, or just misjudged it, almost got it. Well, I would say he did get it, but it's been plucked from him, I would believe. Very near thing.
So a big scrum here for the Irish, and a pretty big one too for the Australians. They're out scrummaging the Irish this afternoon. Oh, look at this stuff. The Irish in all sorts of trouble.
Yes, that was a good push. That was a long way out. And
boy, that Australian scrum just sent those Irishmen back so quickly. They nearly tripped over themselves. They were going back so quickly. So, what does Mr. Anderson say? The note that the Irish charged too early, that Liner hadn't taken the kick.
No, it was a bit surprised whether they thought he'd just tapped it.
Well, he started to move.
Yes, it's what you call a casual dummy with the feet.
But he hadn't kicked it.
No, he hadn't.
And so now they get a penalty out of it.
Yes, that's very tricky, that is.
So a little bit of sleight of hand or sleight of feet there from Michael Liner has hoodwinked the Irishman, and Liner will now kick for goal.
Here's the big push, and it was a big push by the Australian pack, and Ireland still going back. Of course, here's the kick coming up, well within Liner's range, of course. He's kicked well. He's kicked 2 penalties, and he's converted 3 tries.
248 points in 18 and a half. This is his 19th test match. So he's got a strike rate that compares rather favourably with Grant Fox at test match level. That's the angle for Michael Lynagh. First points of the second half. It's taken the Australians 16 minutes in this spell to add to their half-time tally, and they've extended that lead to 27 points to nil. And that's 15 points today for Michael Lynagh.
He's kicking very well as Lynagh.
Just a slight correction to that time. I'm having difficulty reading this most unusual looking clock they have here at the Concord Oval, which is quite different from the ones we see in rugby grounds in New Zealand, and it in fact is not 15 minutes, just 10 minutes.
It's just that the 10
extra
minutes
quarter.
is where the 15 minutes
Yes.
is. And can I suggest that you're not Robinson Crusoe that's made that error, Brendan? You look at it and you think it's quarter of an hour gone. It's not, it's 10 minutes.
So it looks as if Neil Francis is in fact coming off as a result of that injury that he sustained earlier in this spell, and Tony Doyle has come on and taken his place. So Tony Doyle gets his first taste of World Cup rugby. He didn't play in any of the first round matches, but coming on with 30 minutes of the match to go to replace Neil Francis, who has to leave the field and only his second cap for Ireland. And the grim faces on the Irish bench. And we will just confirm with our ABC colleagues about the replacement, because it may well be Brian Spillane, who in fact is the recognised number 8, but the reserve numbers here indicate that number 18 is Tony Doyle, but I suspect that is in fact Spillane. It's come on. Meanwhile, play continues. Campisi right on his line, and he's called for the fair catch.
Well, time is certainly slipping away from Ireland. There's plenty of time to go, but there's no way they're going to catch Australia unless Australia really laps. And that was a bit of a lapse in defence.
Good strong running by Trevor Ringland, down to within 15 metres of the Australian line. It's there. And as I suspected, it is in fact Spillane. So the Irish, who have played a few tricks of some of this afternoon with their numbers, both Mullen and Kiernan, not wearing the numbers that they were told they were going to wear in the programme, and the same with Spillane, who in fact is wearing number 18. There he is at number 7 in the line-out. The recognised number 8 in this Irish pack, with Derek McGrath behind him at the back of the line-out. Those Australian loose forwards up very quickly on the Irish as they release it as far as Mullen, but he doesn't get very far. Inside the Irish half is Bradley kicking for the open side, charged down by Brian Smith, and Bradley again scampers away with the ball. There's a line up here, but it's intercepted by Slack. But he had to wind himself up, and the defence was able to pull him in. Line up. The play just a little scrappy at the moment. Now there's a big gap here between Slack and Campisi, and he's chipping it, but he might have chipped it a bit too deep.
Yes, a bit wide, a bit too strong from Campisi. Interesting to note, Brendan mentioned the back rowers of Australia really going very well and getting up quickly. And I'd have to say that that's one of the problems that Dean is having. Miller in particular for Australia. Number 7 at the back of the lineup is really giving him a torrid time. Alan Jones penciling him at the moment.
Never seems to rest that man. And Dean with a bit more room this time as he's approached by lineup, but he gets his kick away. That's about the best kick we've seen today from the boot of Paul Dean, this very experienced Irish fly half. He's playing today in his 21st cap for Ireland. Been a regular member in recent years. First played for Ireland back in 1981. And that is not a pretty sight from the face of Steve Cutler, but he's continuing. Pushing, I think, in the line out there from Des Fitzgerald. The Irish tight head prop, and the Australians with a defensive penalty. And maybe the Australians are just happy to sit on this lead, knowing that they've got themselves a berth in the semi-finals next week, and they don't want to suffer too many injuries or any more problems. They've already lost Far Jones, one of their key players. Dean, Crossan, first chance for Keith Crossan this afternoon. Just a tiny slip of a man, a rather frail looking figure, at just a shade over 11 stone, but he is quick. Kingston on the 22. Australia again revert to the 6-man line-out. Ball again for Dean, but there's no way through a wall of yellow jerseys there. But up offside, those Australian players. It was Tommy Lawton who was offside, and a chance here for Kiernan to put Ireland's first points on the board. And yes, he will kick for goal, his third shot this afternoon.
Yes, I'm sure Ireland would dearly love to get something on the board, but they really, I must admit, look very much like Scotland did yesterday, and they seem to have lost all heart now. Yesterday I thought that the All Blacks were in control all the time, never really greatly troubled, as obviously Australia have been today. I must say, here in Sydney we expected a much closer game than we're watching now.
Kiernan from 15 metres in from touch. At last raises the flags. And so a good hearty cheer for the Irishmen from quite a large number of Irish supporters here in the crowd. And it's taken them to 18 minutes into the second spell of this match, 58 minutes of rugby before they've been able to post any points. But still, they're an awful long way behind, and there's not much time left. But at last, the Irish flags have something to flutter for. And who knows, maybe it will put a bit of heart into these Irish bellies, which have looked a little listless since that onslaught from the Australians in the first half.
MPZ looking for the quick throw in. Not enough players back and in position for it.
These two Australians, Cutler and Campbell, those two huge big men in the middle of the Australian line-out, like muscular totem poles. They tower above everybody else. But the Irish forwards, with a little more vigour and a little more zeal about their play over the last 10 minutes, and they are winning a little more ball as well. Greg, the ball slips away from him, Crossan, but the whistle had gone for the earlier infringement. And yes, I can't help but feel that maybe the Australians have just gone off the boil a bit, because the Irish forwards are getting back into this match.
Yes, it's a problem. It really is a problem. But then again, they, as you mentioned, Brendan, maybe they've suggested we've got this wrapped up, no more injuries, just play the game out reasonably well.
Campese. You can tell just by looking at this man when he's confident, there's a balance about the way he moves around the paddock, and that's what he's exuding at the moment.
Listen, when he has that confidence, he never seems to rush anything. At times, I think he's very slow moving to the ball, but obviously he has it covered. That's when he has the confidence, I mean.
Look at these two big men. Cameron Lillicrap at the front of the line-out. Philip Matthews. Not often you see a flanker at number 2 in the line-out, but that's where Philip Matthews was taking his position. Pensive look on the face of Matt Bradley, who's had a very tough ride behind that Irish pack this afternoon. Andy McIntyre, the man who scored the first try in the match. The Irish forwards have been penalised for going in over the top after the Australian player had been tackled. And this is kickable for Michael Lynagh. But he might have to withstand a chorus of jeers and boos, I would imagine, if he kicks for goal, because I think the crowd here want to see these Australian backs run.
Yes, I think that, well, it's difficult to say what mood they are in and what Slack is going to suggest to Lynagh, but don't be surprised if he puts one high. because I think that in a few matches, well, here's the replay there now of that line out, which shows the Irish pack coming through, getting to the ball. There's the penalty.
Like Brian Spillane that was penalised, number 18, and Lineup has heeded the wishes of the crowd, and he's put the ball high in the air from 40 metres out. And the ball has gone loose on the 22. And a hand in that ruck by an Irish forward. Derek McGrath trying to push the ball back, but didn't escape the attention of Mr. Anderson. The Australians with a quick tap. Liner running hard. Brigg, Campisi, is this the world record? He was only a metre away from it. And this time it's an Australian forward that has been penalised. Well, he's a real disciplinarian with the whistle, is Mr. Anderson.
So that was a strange decision there. Smith took a quick tap. They almost got there. Thought at that stage they might have just decided to put the penalty over.
And it was Liner that could saw a half gap there, and he put on the gas, tried to ghost his way through, and Campisi, who saw the try line just a metre away, but that's where the defence nailed him. Back on the Irish 22. No way through there for Smith. Wrapped up by Philip Matthews. Good play there by Lawton. Papworth, the quick hands to Campisi. Support from Miller, pushing it wide to Burke. Matt Burke looking for his second try. What a try! The smiles on the faces of the Australian reserves tell it all. Matt Burke pushes Australia up into the 30s after 22 minutes in the second spell. Burke gets his second try, and it was made by the quick hands that pushed the ball wide. Campisi, who cut out Ringland, managed to stand up in the tackle, and good thinking there by Miller, who pushed it very wide to Burke, and he just ghosted through that gap between McNeil and Bradley and in for his second try.
Yes, that's one of the great things about Burke, of course, is the power of the man. Watch how when he gets it, he senses there is a gap. That's Campisi with the ball, looking for support, finds it with Miller, the loose forward, and here he comes with the power, steps inside, he could see the gap was there, and there's the strength of his push-off, and over, fairly wide out, and almost near the back line, dead ball line.
However, I think in fairness to Burke, he always saw the dead ball line there and he was never going to go over. It's not a very deep one here at the Concord Oval. The sponsors' signs had to fit in behind the goalpost, and so the in-goal area has been shortened. However, and so the favoured teams in this World Cup starting to hit form. The All Blacks, the Frenchmen, and now the Australians. You're hot, I suppose, and Michael Liner certainly has got his kicking boots on today. 33-3, and the Irishman looking down the barrel of a good old-fashioned hiding. This is the biggest victory the Australians have ever recorded in their 40-year history of internationals against the Irish, and it was again that man Campisi and Miller. No praise too high there for Jeff Miller for pushing the ball out wide to Burke, and McNeil trying to push him towards the touchline, but he slipped through the gap that was created and through for the try. And you'd have to be a pretty good player to get past Hugo McNeil, as Matt Burke did on that occasion, so that speaks volumes for the Australian winger. Burke, who may not have played in this match if Roger Gould was fully fit and Campisi had taken his place on the wing.
You're quite right there, Brendan. Incidentally, we got back to this play here while that replay was on. It was kicked right to Campisi, and Campisi put it back to this position.
McNeil up from fullback, and he's kicking for Crossan. Campisi's there again, pushing the ball back, knowing that McNeil is up into the play, but Bradley is covering for his fullback. He hasn't found touch. Now what's Campisi going to do here? They're going to spin it wide. Smith in the middle of the paddock. Burke to Liner, should I say. The ball has gone forward from an Irish forward. The referee playing advantage for the Australians. Campisi, who's seen a lot of the play this afternoon, and slides the ball ever so sweetly into touch.
It's a long pass from Papworth on Campese.
Campese, who's now living here in Sydney, is a member of the Randwick Club, although I understand, Trevor, that he hasn't actually had a game yet for the Randwick Club here.
Well, halfway through the season, he hasn't had a run yet.
Meanwhile, there's an injury back far across the paddock to an Australian and an Irishman. And it's Brendan Mullen, the youngest member of the Irish backline, who's getting a bit of the, not so much the magic sponge here as the magic ice or the magic freeze.
It's interesting you're talking about Campese playing for Randwick. Of course, he went to Randwick this year, has not played there, and it's basically, purely simply because of representative commitments. It's something that I must admit does disappoint a lot of Sydney followers of rugby, but they do not, the tournaments such as this, see much of their star players, and I guess that happens in Auckland too.
That's right. If it's any consolation to you, Trevor, it's also a major problem in the metropolitan areas in New Zealand, of course, now with the advent of the South Pacific Championship, and I think John Kerwin also would probably be on about a similar rating with Campese. I don't think he's had a game for his club side this year either.
A great pity, I believe.
Really back at the front of the line-out for the Australians. Campbell. Number 3, it's Steve Cuthbert, trying to get his hands under the ball. It's been a tough day for Paul Dean today.
Yes, he hasn't even, when he's passed the ball, he hasn't looked very happy at all.
Been under pressure all afternoon. Bradley running wide, and Mullen up towards the 22. But no way through the Australian defence there, and Bradley again kicking over the top. And he positioned it well. Matt Bradley, who like 4 members of this of Irish side today, made their debuts for Ireland against the Australian team in 1984 in the match at Dublin, which the Australians won by 16 points to 9, and what was their toughest victory on that Grand Slam tour. In fact, it was the only time in the series that they were behind. As we're looking at Brendan Mullen, who looks like another casualty in the Irish side, but he's up and he's all right, but he's favouring his leg a little. And he must have damaged himself in this very strong tackle when he took the pass, and the Irish forwards came in over the top of him, and I think he might have sustained a blow to his knee. But he is, in fact, coming off the field.
Yes, I think the way the players came down on top of him, he had his leg awkwardly placed.
And now we just have to do some mental arithmetic to hear how many replacements have the Irish got on. So many players coming and going. They're only allowed 2, of course.
Well, I think there's only been one.
There's only been the one.
Second
this will be the second one.
Yeah.
That's right. There's also a replacement on the Australian team. So we have actually had 3 replacements, but they're allowed 2 under international rules in each team. And it looks as if it's David Irwin, number 16, that's about to come on. So the Irish back to their full complement of 15 with about 14 minutes of the match remaining, but the Australians are ahead by 33 points to 3. It was 24-0 at half-time. 1 second half try to Matt Burke. Irwin quickly into the fray, but he's lost the ball. 2 Australians there outside the 22. Good play by Dean as he went underneath it and halted that promising move by the Australians. And another absolute mess for which Mr. Anderson says we must have respect.
Alan Jones surprised a little bit in the selection of Miller. Not surprised, everyone, but Miller is really getting around the field. And in that case, he followed that ball right, and he was the man that upset the centres of Ireland.
Liner. The long pass to Campese. If he had taken that, he probably would have been in. He was going at 100 miles an hour, but he couldn't handle it. But he's recovered very quickly. But he's a bit too casual with his kick, and he hasn't found touch. Bradley. And I think those Australian forwards were well up inside the 10-metre circle. Well, they didn't retire outside the 10-metre circle, so they've been penalised.
And that was an instance where we suddenly see the bad play of Campese. Very casual, dangerous kick. and it was not needed at all.
Bradley, dragged by Andrew Slack, who's had a very quiet day at centre for Australia this afternoon. It's been Liner and Campese that have done and directed much of the Australian back play this afternoon. Liner having a little run, but now he's having quite a big run backwards.
And Ireland finally getting it together in the forwards.
Fire in those Irish forwards at last, but it's probably a bit too late. And there's Hugo McNeill up from fullback as well. So they're all in there at the moment. They're only a few metres short of the Australian line, and it's there for the Australian backs. Dean, Kiernan, Ringland is coming from the right wing, Crossan, but the pass wasn't the best to Keith Crossan. He had to check his stride, and that gave the Australian defence time to nail him. But the Australians are caught offside. Keith Crossan with a wry smile on his face. But if that pass had been a little better, it might have been interesting.
There's slight altercation there with Crossan and Campese. Crossan, sorry.
So another stoppage for injury, Trevor.
Yes. Well, they may replay it, of course. Crossan was bumped by Liner, which was just one of those things that really meant nothing. David Campese. Let's see if we can see it. Here's Liner coming up.
This is
that's on
Michael
the far
Liner, who made a return trip here.
Yes,
he went up and he came down.
Yes, this is not the incident we were about to talk about, because it's on this side of the field. That's on the far side, and Liner going backwards, and the ball finally on the ground, and Ireland pack looking a lot better.
Good play there by Terry Kingston, the Irish hooker, who managed to free it to Matthews, and eventually it came back to Bradley. And let's have a look at this pass first of all to Crossan. You'll see here this last pass from Ringland to Crossan, where he just had to stop and pull it in a bit, and the defence managed to catch him.
There's the bump, and you'll see Campese come in and have a little bit of an argument there.
So from the penalty, the Irish 10 metres short of the line. Spillane, Hugo McNeill, and another try to the Irish fullback. He makes a regular job of scoring tries to this man, and he's picked up another one today. He got 2 versus the Tongans, he got another one against the Canadians, and he gets another World Cup try today to give a smidgen of respectability to the Irish scoreline at 33-7. And it was a very good try too. From the tap penalty, it was Matthews that took play up to within 10 metres, laid up very nicely for Bradley. Spillane, the quick hands, out to McNeill at full speed, the dummy, and Hugo McNeill, this very experienced Irish fullback, in for the try.
And the try was converted, and here, of course, is the step back by McNeill. He wrong-footed the defence, or the cover defence couldn't quite get to him. A good try.
And Michael Kiernan can take some of the credit for that try, for a very slick pass to him, to McNeill, which put him in the clear. So the Irish reply with a try in the second half. So the try count in the second spell has been 1 apiece, 1 to Burke, and now 1 to McNeill. It's 33-9. But about 10 minutes of the match remaining. So the Irish are going to need a lot more tries than that if their World Cup campaign is to last beyond another 10 minutes. So this tournament, which started with 16 teams a couple of weeks ago, is now down to 5. Now for tomorrow, of course, there will only be 4 teams left in the World Cup. Slack, the Australian captain, Grigg. We've seen very little of the Australian midfielders this afternoon, or Peter Grigg. It's been quite amazing the amount of play that has gone to Liner, Campese and Burke. And Papworth, Slack and Grigg have virtually been passengers in this match for most of it.
Well, Australia's backline play has changed with this team this year. They're very rarely sending the ball along on a straight backline movement. It's been quite interesting, which I think is a fault. They do a lot of cutout play.
Smith running from midfield, and now Brett Papworth has an opportunity as he gives chase, but the kick was too deep. So another opportunity here for the Australians. They're only 10 metres from the Irish line. Ryan Smith giving his instructions to his line-out. But it's an Irish throw, Kingston. And a good tap from Philip Matthews. It's Irish ball. Bradley, the Dean, gets away from line-up.
Yes, well, I think that Australia will try very hard now.
The Irish have been penalised in that line-out, so a kicking opportunity here for Liner, but surely they'll take the tap. Yes, they do. And Liner's putting it into the in-goal area. And it's a bit of a lolly scramble, and a green shirt gets there first. Bradley keen to take the short, quick drop out from the 22.
And it's certainly relieved the pressure. And here's the high kick coming down. Those goalposts are tremendously high. Very difficult for the players looking through it. Ireland lost it and then regained it.
Play is resumed from the line-out, and it's gone right along the Irish backline as far as Keith Crossan on the left wing. But the Irish are really just moving the ball across the paddock. They haven't made any impression up the field, but now they are with Spillane. And there's room there for Kiernan. Michael Kiernan gets out of one, 2 tackles up to halfway. Seemed to drift away from the support, however. And the Irish forwards penalised for going in over the top of Kiernan after he was tackled. Just a note that the network news will follow as soon as the rugby is finished, and that has about 7 minutes to run. So Australia well ahead on the penalty count as well. As Liner angled that kick for the corner flag, but he was off target. But the Australians still on attack from the drop out of the 22. A good take by Steve Cutler, who doesn't seem to be bothered by the very deep gash to his nose. He's continued to play on. Smith over the top for Campisi. And Campisi, he nearly kept that ball in play. The skills of this man are endless. The dizzy Parramatta Road at the background there, over beyond the dead ball area here at the Concord Oval, which incidentally takes its name not from any peace or harmony that is bestowed on this ground, but from the fact that it's in the suburb of Concord. Bradley chips the ball into touch.
Well, undoubtedly Australia would hope to score here.
It's in the arms of Lillicrap. Frees it for Smith. And again, those Australian backs bunched very close together in the midfield, and so Papworth with a little kick ahead, but it's ricocheted off a Irish boot. I think it might have been knocked forward as well by an Australian, and so the scrum to take place right underneath the Irish posts. Philip Matthews, who's been in the wars this afternoon, has had another knock. And Phil Orr looks as if he might require some medical attention as well.
Yes, well, the Australian backs in that last movement, when I thought that they had a great opportunity of going in the dying moments of this game. Here comes the movement now. Let's see how close and tight they are out wide in front of the goal post, because it comes out fairly cleanly, as you can see. But they're not all in the picture, but there were 3 or 4 of them really within arm's length of each other, which makes it very difficult to get the ball away, and they were not standing far enough back.
And so the scrum to go down. Ireland with the loose head, but it's right underneath their own posts, and again the big Australian scrum, but trying to wheel the Irish off the ball. Spillane coming away with it. Anderson, Willie Anderson, who lays it back nicely for Matthews. This is better play from the Irish forwards. Perhaps if we'd seen more of this in the first 20 minutes, the Australians may not have posted those 3 quick tries, and Ireland could still have been in the match. Campisi controls it well. That's his 22. McNeil, his opposite number. And has he found touch? He has. So when we look back at this match, we can see very clearly that the winning of it took place in a space of 8 minutes between the 17th and the 25th minute of the first half. In the space of 7-8 minutes, Australia posted 3 tries and went from 6-0 to 24-0, and they've been in control ever since. The Irish have had their moments since then, but that's really all they've been.
Certainly Ireland now not looking a very good side at all. They're waiting for that final bell. And of course it is the end of their run in the World Cup series.
Well, I guess 1987 just wasn't meant to be the year for the Irish. They haven't had much luck. They lost their key loose forward, Nigel Carr. Some would claim he's the best loose forward in Europe. He was out with an accident a few days, in fact, before the Irish team were due to leave for New Zealand. And they haven't had much luck since they've been down here either. Here's Crossan having a little run. It's there for Bradley on halfway. Dean, should I say McNeil up from fullback. Irwin pops the ball nicely over the top to Trevor England, but he's getting away from no one. And away goes Burke again. But the ball stepped into touch.
A reminder that the Television New Zealand Network News will be on air immediately after this rugby test finishes in Sydney.
The line-out to take place just on halfway. Australia ahead by 33 points to 9. After they led by 24-0 at half-time. The Australian forwards have been penalised for offside in the line-out inside the Australian half. The Irish decide to tap and run it. Matthews. There again for Bradley. And the Australian forwards are really going only at half pace at the moment. And Dean couldn't get away from the ankle tap from line-up. And into touch it goes. Yes, if we have a look at the Irish campaign for this World Cup, it's been a chapter of just little niggling things that have gone wrong for them, which certainly haven't helped them. They lost Nigel Carr, then of course their coach Mick Doyle had that heart scare in Wellington. He was in hospital for a couple of days. Then they've had a lot of travelling to do. They haven't had a chance really to settle down, but Matthews is having a very good last quarter in this match. Picks up the loose ball and charges towards the line. It's there for the Irish backs. Kiernan. So absolute delight from the many Irish supporters here at the Concord Oval. They've got something to cheer about. So the Irish have outscored the Australians in the second half by 2 tries to 1, but in the end it's not going to be anywhere near enough, but at least it has given some respectability to the scoreline. And a lovely little tip there from Paul Dean, and look at big Phil Orr charging like a 3/4, a 17-stone 3/4, picked up beautifully by Philip Matthews. The Irish loose forwards, McGrath there as well, coming into their own at last, and a little swivel there by Michael Kiernan, and the defence opened up.
Yes, and in the dying moments you'll notice that the Australian forwards are very slow to come across and cover all this play which the driving forwards of Ireland have really carried out. The Australian forwards have said the game's all over, but it wasn't, because here's the breakthrough and a very neat step through, beating the defence.
And a try, Kiernan converted his own try, 33-15 with the full time about a minute away. So the Irish have come back with 15 points after the Wallabies, perhaps understandably, going off the boil in the latter stages of this match after they built up that big lead. And there is the hooter for full time. So at the Concord Oval, the Australian campaign at last comes alive with a very good performance, ahead by 24-0. They won 33-15, and the winning of the match took place in a spell of 8 minutes in the first half when they ran in 3 tries. And it's full time.
33-15 to Australia over Ireland. So in the first semi-final, also at Concord Oval in Sydney next Saturday, it will be Australia against France. New Zealand to play the other semi-final a week from today, and that's against the winner of tomorrow's game between Wales and England in Brisbane. We're back with highlights of today.
So line-up with the conversion. So the Australians, they haven't looked too impressive, but the fact is on the scoreboard, they're looking most impressive, out by 12-0. So another opportunity for the Australian backs, just 5 metres from the Australian line. They control from Kleiman at the back. This was a good scrummage from the Australians. Very good scrummaging from the Australians. Over the line it goes, or does it? No, Mr. Anderson, who was in very good position to look at that ball. The control just dissipated there right at the last from the Australians. But we'll have another scrum, the Australians going forward.
Bradley, the Irish halfback, ready to pounce. And here we go again. They'll try and perfect it a little better this time, will they? Tyneman picked it up to Brian Smith. It's another Australian try.
And as you can see, it was really pretty simple. The defence close in was not there, and Smith did it easily.
Michael Liner from 15 metres in from touch. Through what must be the tallest uprights I've ever seen at a rugby ground, and I imagine it must be a psychological boost or advantage for a goal kicker to be kicking at these posts, because the crossbar must look so low when you compare where it sits in relation to the height of the uprights.
Not putting it together at all.
They've had problems throughout this World Cup. They haven't been helped by a pretty difficult travelling schedule. And the ball rolling towards the corner flag. Ringland manages to keep it in, but Burke wasn't going to allow him to get away. And he's having a super game today, is the 24-year-old Queenslander Michael Liner. I'm sure from the Australians' point of view, nothing could be finer than the sight of Michael Liner in this sort of form. The Australians again on the Irish line. Liner, Papworth, beautiful support play.
Matthew Burke.
And Matthew Burke gets the try. And again, it started just a few metres from the Irish line. This is where the Australian backs today seem at their most lethal. Papworth, the little slip pass through to Burke, and there wasn't a hand laid on him. Line-up with his easiest kick today. It's 24 points to 0. And again, those Irish forwards are pretty loose, but the ball is there for them. McGrath coming in at first 5'8" on full speed. And Dean with Ringland. Now there's a little bit of room here for Ringland, but those orange jerseys swarm him towards the touchline. The ball is still in play. Tyneman a couple of metres from his own line. And the Irish forwards have been penalised, in particular Terry Kingston. Going in over the top there. And the Australians, to their relief, receive a penalty just a couple of metres from their corner flag.
As on that last move, Ireland, I thought, took the wrong option. They came round the blind side, and the attacking players on the blind side suddenly found a wall of orange jerseys.
Bradley waiting underneath it with some timely support from Philip Matthews. 10 metres outside the Australian 22. Bradley, and there was a line-up of green jerseys here. Dean, but a poor pass from Dean. And through goes Campisi. Now Campisi, can he control it? Here goes Crossan giving him the chase again. And what does Mr. Anderson say? No try. There was no one in front of him at this point. And again, Crossan just flew in from the wing. Flew in, the ball drifted away a little from Campisi. He had to come in on the angle, and that just slowed him up enough to allow Crossan to get there and clear it away. And the ball has gone loose on the 22. And a hand in that ruck by an Irish forward. Derek McGrath trying to push the ball back, but didn't escape the attention of Mr. Anderson. The Australians with a quick tap. Liner running hard. Brigg, Campisi. Is this the world record? He was only a metre away from it. And this time it's an Australian forward that has been penalised. Well, he's a real disciplinarian with the whistle, is Mr. Anderson. And it was Liner that could saw a half gap there, and he put on the gas, tried to ghost his way through, and Campisi, who saw the try line just a metre away, but that's where the defence nailed him. Back on the Irish 22. No way through there for Smith. Wrapped up by Philip Matthews. Good play there by Lawton. Papworth, the quick hands to Campisi. Support from Miller, pushing it wide to Burke. Matt Burke looking for his second try. What a try!
Yes, that's one of the great things about Burke, of course, is the power of the man. Watch how when he gets it, he senses there is a gap. It's Campisi with the ball, looking for support, finds it with Miller, the loose forward, and here he comes with the power, steps inside, he could see the gap was there, and there's the strength of his push-off, and over, fairly wide out, and almost near the back line.
you're hot, I suppose. And Michael Liner certainly has got his kicking boots on today. Liner having a little run, but now he's having quite a big run backwards.
And Ireland finally getting it together in the forwards.
Fire in those Irish forwards at last, but it's probably a bit too late. And there's Hugo McNeill up from fullback as well. So they're all in there at the moment. They're only a few metres short of the Australian line, and it's there for the Australian backs. Dean, Kiernan, Ringland has come in from the right wing, Crossan, but the pass wasn't the best to Keith Crossan. He had to check his stride, and that gave the Australian defence time to nail him. But the Australians are caught offside. Good play there by Terry Kingston, the Irish hooker, who managed to free it to Matthews. And eventually it came back to Bradley. And let's have a look at this pass first of all to Crossan. You'll see here this last pass from Ringland to Crossan, where he just had to stop and pull it in a bit. And the defence managed to catch him. The Irish, 10 metres short of the line. Spillane, Hugo McNeill, and another try to the Irish fullback. It was Matthews that took play up to within 10 metres, laid up very nicely for Bradley. Spillane, the quick hands, out to McNeill at full speed, the dummy, and Hugo McNeill, this very experienced Irish fullback, in for the try. After they led by 24-0 at half-time, and the Australian forwards have been penalised for offside in the line-out inside the Australian half. The Irish decide to tap and run it. Matthews there again for Bradley, and the Australian forwards are really going only at half pace at the moment, and Dean couldn't get away from the ankle tap from lineup, and into touch it goes. Yes, if we have a look at the Irish campaign for this World Cup, it's been a chapter of just little niggling things that have gone wrong for them, which certainly haven't helped them. They lost Nigel Carr, then of course their coach Mick Doyle had that heart scare in Wellington. He was in hospital for a couple of days. Then they've had a lot of travelling to do, and they haven't had a chance really to settle down. But Matthews is having a very good last quarter in this match, picks up the loose ball and charges towards the line. It's there for the Irish backs. Kiernan, and a lovely little tip there from Paul Dean, and look at big Phil Orr charging like a three-quarter, a 17-stone three-quarter, picked up beautifully by Philip Matthews. The Irish loose forwards, McGrath there as well, coming into their own at last, and a little swivel there by Michael Kiernan, and the defence opened up.
And Michael Kiernan converted his own try. The final score 33 points to 15 to Australia over Ireland. It was a match which really must rank as one of the worst spectacles of the entire tournament, but Australia had that decisive period between about the 18th and 25th minute in the first half, when they scored 3 tries and opened up to a 24-0 lead. Well, after match reaction from Concord Oval now, here's Donald Lenihan and Andrew Slack.
Oh, it was obviously very highly. The first 25 minutes was something else, weren't they? We were thinking about that Wales test in Cardiff at one stage, but no, it was a good day. Yeah.
You lost Nick Farr-Jones in the first couple of minutes. Didn't seem to upset the side at all.
No, well, I mean, we obviously feel that Smithy is a great replacement, and he proved that. Although losing someone like Nick in the first minute is difficult, so it was particularly good effort for the guys to put that out of their head, but I mean, Smithy did the job when he was on there.
Today the Australians seemed to really turn on. The quarterfinals, also the attitude seemed to change.
Yeah, well, you know, as much as we try and build ourselves up for other games, I don't think the Australian team has had one of their characteristics hasn't been to really switch on for the lower type of test matches, but when they count, I think we do, and that was proven today.
Just very disappointed. You know, we got off to a terrible start, and there's no way you can beat Australia when you go 15, 20 points down, whatever it was. But the thing that I was most pleased about again is that, you know, after 20 minutes our backs were to the wall, and we said, look, we've 60 minutes left in the World Cup. Let's go out and let's have a cut. And I was proud of everyone there today. They gave everything.
Yeah, particularly his tough travelling schedule, Donald. Do you think that counted against you?
Well, I think it did at the start of the competition. I think we've done more travelling than any other team in the World Cup. And as a result of that, it took us the first 2 games to get all that travelling out of our system. I thought we came back against Tonga well. We had a great game. And, you know, we were slow starting today. But, you know, if it was a 60-minute game, forget the first 20 minutes, I think we'd have done all right.
Donald Lenihan and his team on their way home after being eliminated in the quarterfinals in Sydney this afternoon.